Well, welcome to Substack Live. I'm Dean Obeidallah, and joining me today is Qasim Rashid, who so many of you know. He's a tireless human rights activist and an attorney. He's got a great Substack, which you should subscribe to. Let's address this with Qasim Rashid, my brother. Qasim, nice to see you, brother. How's everything going?
It's going well, Dean. I'm managing. That's the best way I can put it. I'm managing given everything that's happening. I'm hopeful you're the same.
Look, it is challenging times. I think everyone
Yeah.
listening, watching, who listens to my show on SiriusXM or reads the stuff on Substack, we know we're navigating through different times. And I want to speak to you as someone who's a human rights attorney about what it's like internally being in the US fighting for human rights. But I want to start with a story that's very personal to you, and it was really distressing to me. First of all, your dad passed away recently. And I'm sorry, I sent your condolences on that. But this story arises from that. You went to the cemetery with your children and somebody rides up on a motorcycle and knocks on your window and starts spewing anti-Arab, like you're not even Arab, but anti-brown
Yeah.
hate. So share a little bit of that
Yeah.
story, please.
Yeah. And I think it's important we tell these stories because until we are telling these stories and letting folks understand the reality of our lived experiences, we really can't paint the picture of why we need to work together, why racism is not some yesteryear thing, and what they need to do going forward. And so, yeah, my father passed on the last Friday of Ramadan on March 28th, and about a week after, I was taking my children to the cemetery just to pay our respects. My children were very close to my father as well, and somebody knocks on my window on a motorcycle, rolled on the window, and starts spewing, racist epithets, calls me a sand N-word. And when I started recording, suddenly he became conscious, let out a couple of the swears, and then sped off. And I could have let it go at that point, but two things. One, this isn't the first time I've been called that epithet, and in fact, I'm getting called it more and more under this Trump regime. But two, it's one thing to say it to me as a grown adult. I had my 16-year-old and my 11-year-old in the car with me as well. And I needed them to understand that one, this is not okay. And two, we still, at least so far, live in a country where we have a voice and we can raise our voices. I'm fortunate to have a large platform that I can get the message out. And I can tell you in my past work with the Department of Justice, one of the things that we struggled with is showing the Department of Justice the hate crimes because people from our communities don't report them. We're like, oh, it's
Yeah,
fine, just let it go.
right.
And I tell people, no, we need to report them. And for me, this was an opportunity to lead by example and do that. And I think my kids saw the message that they should never allow people to speak to them that way, and that they should raise their voice in a way where there's meaningful accountability and awareness of the hate that we're experiencing.
It is, and there are many people in immigrant communities who will not go to the authorities, who will not call attention, especially now,
Yeah.
where they have to worry about if they go to the authorities, are the authorities going to say, "Are you here legally? Look at your green card. Let me see your
Exactly.
papers." That kind of stuff, which really it reminded me of New York years ago under Bloomberg, where the Muslim community was under fire by the Bloomberg law. The police were following us everywhere, at mosques, where you work,
Yeah.
everything you do. And the result was Muslims who were victims of crime were not going to police. There was no
Exactly.
community policing. It was the opposite. They were viewed as an adversary. Thankfully, that changed under de Blasio, and now it's not the same at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we work together. Now there's over 1,000 Muslim Americans serving in NYPD. Like it's
Amazing.
gone so far the opposite.
Yeah.
Like we're a big part of NYPD, so you can feel comfortable calling up and reporting something. But it's so deeply, and you had other things we've talked in the past. I mean, didn't you have criminal charges against someone
Yeah,
years ago?
yeah. I mean, a couple of years ago, I was sitting in federal court testifying against a man who wanted to kill me for being a Muslim. And Dean, you and I are both privileged in the sense that one, we're men. We know that 70% of these attacks are on Muslim women. Two, we're both lawyers. We understand how the law works, and we have that power. And then three, we have platforms,
Right.
and we're citizens, right? We have so much privilege in this space, and if we don't use it, how can we expect our sisters and brothers who maybe don't have citizenship status or aren't lawyers, don't have how can we expect them to speak up when we're not leading by example? So for me, it wasn't just about me. It was more importantly, far more importantly, about my children, about our children, about the broader community out there, that we cannot allow this kind of bigotry to go unchallenged.
Yeah, and you make a great point that because of the privilege we have, I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm born here. Even though I get emails like, go back to your country, which is
Yeah,
New Jersey.
New
And
Jersey,
I'm like, okay, I have
which
to go back to
technically,
Jersey. I have to go
which
over the
technically
bridge.
could be a different country depending on who you ask. But okay.
Exactly. So besides the board getting bred, I have to go back to Jersey, which I love Jersey. Don't get me wrong. I live
Yeah,
in New York now. I think we do have an extra obligation, to be
yeah,
blunt, to speak out
100%.
even more, because I have friends who have green cards who are comedians who don't want to do jokes about Trump on stage. That's where
Yeah,
it's going, folks. The
that's right.
self-censorship is the goal of authoritarians. The authoritarian dictator's best friend is self-censorship.
That's right.
So people stop saying things. So a comic says, I'm not going to mock Trump, or I'm not going to post this anti-Trump thing or this
That's right.
mocking Trump thing, because
That's
they're
right.
afraid. They don't know what's next. They know
Yeah,
you can't post about Palestine, but
that's
is
right.
it anything about Trump as a comedian? And we don't know. And I can't tell them not to be worried.
There's
I just
no
can't tell them that.
there's no schematic. Dean,
Right.
I've got people emailing me and saying, "Hey, I love your content. I've been a subscriber since day one, a paying subscriber, but I'm gonna have to cancel because I can't. I travel through customs a lot. I can't have them go through my phone and see your post calling out Trump's fascism, calling out the genocide in Palestine by Netanyahu. Like it's just too risky for me. I mean, that's the
Right.
level of self censorship that's being imposed right now. We need to be aware of it.
I agree. And some of my friends are like, well, if I go overseas, I'm going to bring a burner phone because I don't want them to go through my phone. I'm like, I'm not. I will tell ICE or Border Patrol, what do you want to know about Trump? Let me explain to you. He's a 34-time convicted felon who was charged with 31 counts of espionage, who was convicted of 4 felonies for attempting a coup, inciting a terrorist attack on our capital, who should be in a prison cell right now. I have no problem saying that. I will capture on video. Arrest me, make me a hero. I mean,
Yeah,
come on, like that's the thing. Like, so I'm using it. I got my privilege to actually. I'm weaponizing it. I'm
you
like,
have to.
do this, Border Patrol. And then I haven't heard of it except for the one lawyer who was Arab American who was representing some of the Palestinian protester in the states being held. But that brings us to something else. Abrego Garcia. Again, you're do a lot of legal work, human rights. We're watching the Garcia case. I have to applaud the Democrats here for staying on message.
Yeah,
And Senator Van Hollen said it very clearly on
brilliant.
Sunday. This is not about a man. This is about a man's due process rights. That was
Right.
so succinct. It was like almost like Republicans. I'm like, oh my God, Democrats. And they're all, Maxwell Frost was staying on message. It's the idea of due process. Mr. Garcia is a human being. He's entitled to due process under our system. If you could take it away from him, you could take it from anyone. Anyone
Yeah.
watching, listening, reading the articles, they could take yours. And understand that's not a joke. We are living under a fascist regime right now. So I wanted to get your take on it and your concerns.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about how comedians aren't making jokes because they're afraid of what's going to happen. There's that dystopian movie V for Vendetta where that's
Yes,
exactly
sir.
kind of the plot of the movie, right? A comedian makes a joke and he gets disappeared. And, anyone who says, well, that's not going to happen right now, it's already happening.
Yeah.
It's already happening. The Fifth Amendment doesn't say that due process is for every citizen. It doesn't say it's for every documented resident. It says it's for every person. And there's two really important takeaways from that. One, and the Supreme Court has ruled on this repeatedly, that any being, any human being within the borders of the United States has, or under the domain of the U.S., has due process of law. And so the fact that they're denying these individuals due process of law can only mean one of two things. One, it means that they're viewed as subhuman. And we know what happens when you start to dehumanize a community. We've seen it happen in Holocaust Germany before. We've seen it happen with the Rohingya. We're seeing it happen with the Uyghurs. We're seeing it happen with the Srebrenica genocide. I mean, none of this is new. That's the one meaning. The second meaning, and this is to me just as dangerous, is that the Trump regime has decided that the constitutional is optional. It's a cafeteria. It's a cafeteria constitution. And if it's a cafeteria constitution, then we are all on the menu. And that's the fundamental problem because where do you draw the line? There isn't one. It's whatever the regime wants. And Heather Cox Richardson said this the other day too. She goes, at this point, you need to understand none of us are safe if we don't stand up right now and stop this from happening. That's how serious this is. So I don't care if you're the staunchest MAGA or the staunchest bleeding heart liberal. The fundamental point is this is not about left versus right. This is about, do we want a functioning democratic republic or do we want autocracy? And I'm hopeful that even if you vehemently despise Democrats, you still want a functioning democratic republic where every person has equal rights and due process under the law.
Last night I had a caller on my radio show, and sometimes I have MAGA people, and he called in, and he was regurgitating the Donald Trump's new line. There's just too many undocumented immigrants. We don't have the capacity, so they
Yeah.
can't get due process. And the guy was saying that. I go, okay, so the guy lived in California. I go, oh, so if the police say, we're too busy to go to the court to get a search warrant, so we're just going to go to your house and find things. Is that okay with you? And he like pauses. He goes, no, that's not okay. Of course, it's not okay. It's all of our rights. I don't like a lot of the MAGA people, but I still believe they get the same protection, and they should.
Right.
And I would argue for them to have the same First Amendment rights and same Fourth Amendment rights and Fifth Amendment and Sixth Amendment. You name it.
Yep.
Second Amendment, we kind of debate, but the other amendment, I'm like, and that's my sincere commitment. We
Yep.
can't play games. But if it wasn't the Trump regime, maybe we would not be as animated as we are. If it was, say, a regime that's more moderate, and you're like, okay, they made a mistake, and we're going to push them on this. This is a regime that wants to take your freedoms, that wants to implement
Right.
an autocracy, a fascist leader who's a king. We don't get that. That's why it's so important to fight on this.
And they're not being quiet about that. They're not being secretive about that. It's not like they're using coded language. He's flat out saying we don't want or we don't need due process. And by the way, the January 6th insurrectionists all got due process. None of them were arbitrarily convicted. None of them were like, well, I've decided I don't like you, so now go to prison. They all went, they had legal counsel, they were represented in court, they had a chance to
Yep.
plea bargain, evidence was introduced, a jury convicted them, and they were sentenced according to due process of law. That's all we're asking for. And if that's too much, then maybe a functioning democratic republic is not for you.
And that's your choice. Because,
Yeah.
I joked with the guy yesterday. I'm like, okay, so you don't like our Constitution. What country's Constitution should we use? Like, why is it? No, I love our Constitution. I'm like, but you don't like the way it protects people.
Exactly.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Because, to be honest, and everyone knows this who's watching and listening, a lot of the MAGA people repeat what they're told on Fox News.
Yeah.
And they repeat what Trump posts on Truth Social. And there's no pressure, there's no one pushing back. And the slightest pushback reveals there's no depth to it. And what they're saying might sound good on Fox News, but in the real world, it's dangerous. And this is not one that was political. This really shouldn't be. We're not naive. It shouldn't be political. We're telling you as lawyers, you don't want to surrender any right, because it's very hard to get it back once it's surrendered. History tells you that. And
You're
that's part
exactly
of the
right.
struggle.
You're exactly right. I don't do so much anymore, but years ago I would train law enforcement on Fourth Amendment search and seizure, right to privacy, and it was with a good friend of mine who is a sheriff. This is in Virginia, and great guy. I mean, he got it. Like, he really understood the issue with law enforcement and the concerns people have, people of color especially. And we're in this cadet training, and a cadet raises his hand and says, Sheriff, I have a question. How do we trick people into giving us consent to search their cars? And the sheriff, like, his face drops. He goes, raise your hand if you're a Christian. And of course, everyone's hand goes up because it's all, Southern Virginia white folks. And he goes, all right, now Qasim here, he's a Muslim. How would you feel if he asked you, hey, how can I trick you into converting to Islam? And I'm like, yo, what are you bringing me into this for? What did I do? Why are you making me the target here? And obviously they all said, well, that would be a terrible thing. He goes, it's that level of sacredness that you need to appreciate the Constitution. It is not something to be tricked.
Sure.
You are the agent of the state with lethal authority to kill people. That document, that Fourth Amendment, is there as a thin line between tyranny and democracy. You can't be tricking people. If people give you consent willingly, that's one thing. But if you have to trick them, then guess what? It's not obtained legally, and you need to stop immediately.
I agree. And then did you tell the class, repeat after me, there's only one God, but
Yes,
Allah.
Allah.
That's it. That's what you have to do, folks, to convert to Islam. I mean, you have to be sincere about it. We're not going to get into that. All right, we'll put that aside. Look, as someone, you're an immigrant here. You love this country. You're a lawyer. You've run for Congress. You've tried to change this nation for the better and fight for the civil rights of other people. What is it like to see the nation that you came to and your family came to now evolving into something that people in other parts of the world flee from? I mean, I'm being honest. They would flee from what they're seeing right here. What is it like?
It's mortifying, Dean. And remember, I'm from Pakistan. I'm proud of my Pakistani heritage. I still love my birth country of Pakistan. I was 4 years old when we came here. We came here in significant part because the Pakistani government, while established as a secular republic, has devolved into a quasi-theocracy with right-wing evangelicals deciding who gets rights and who doesn't. Sound pretty familiar to what's happening right now in this country, doesn't it?
Yep.
And as a result, you've seen a massive brain drain. You've got brilliant economists and Nobel Prize winners leaving the country, scientists leaving the country, doctors leaving the country because the opportunities just aren't there. And you can see the economy crash. You see the level of turmoil, increase, the level of instability increase, businesses pulling out. Everything you're seeing happening in the United States has been happening in Pakistan for the last 40 years since they began this quasi-theocracy. And so for me to see that same path happen here, it's devastating, it's painful, it's mortifying. I've said this before, my brother served in the United States Marines. So, for us, being American is not just something that we were arbitrarily born into, it's by choice. And I've always said that when you choose to be something, when you choose to take on something, it often means even more to you in certain ways because you're making a conscious decision. We could have lived in Canada, we could have gone to Mexico, we could have gone to the UK. We chose here for a
Right.
reason. And that reason ultimately has to be that it is a secular country where everybody has or should have the equal opportunity to success. The fact that's being stripped away with disinformation, with hate, with vitriol, it is devastating. But it also makes me, and this could just me being emotional because my father just passed, and I'm thinking about the legacy and the work he put in. And for me, like my own mortality, not to get too existential, is much more visual in front of me, right? And
Sure.
my thing is, I have 25, 30 years left, maybe, if I'm lucky. I better get my butt in gear and fight for the basic human dignity of all people because who knows if I'm going to have it tomorrow. I need to embrace it today.
That's very well put, my friend. And, you know, for me, my father picked this country and my grandparents on my mom's side. My mom's Sicilian, my dad's Palestinian. But it's really in their memory that I fight because this country welcomed my father in the 1950s as a Palestinian refugee to this country, who then met my Italian mother in New Jersey, which is, the oldest story of the book. That's how it works out all the time.
Yeah,
But the point is, I really do feel this obligation. And I've said it many times to various people I've talked to on shows or on their shows, an obligation because the United States, I appreciate the United States. I'm grateful they let my
right.
father come in. I'm grateful they let my grandparents from Sicily come here and make a better life. And I'm not going to let Donald Trump or MAGA take away the rights that they came to this country for. So
Yeah,
that's why we're all in this together to fight the good fight. And it's not for me per se, it's for others, as we talk about Qasim. It's for others who can't speak out. It reminds me of after 9/11. I mean, after 9/11, I know I present like a white guy or an ethnic guy, but not Arab or Muslim and stuff like that. And I realized a short time on that I had an opportunity to talk to people and explain what it really means to be an Arab or a Muslim.
yeah,
And there was no accent that was sometimes an impediment, or there was no foreignness to me that sometimes people see people in other countries, they don't feel that connection. And I used to get comments all the time like, "You're Arab, but you look so normal." That was one I used to get a lot. I'm like, "Thank you. I don't exactly what normal means white. We know what that means,
yeah, of course.
And Brian Kilmeade's in the news today for some other stuff. I was on Brian Kilmeade's Fox News show, and this is a completely true story. I was on Brian Kilmeade's Fox News show about 2 years after 9/11, and he said, "You're Arab and Muslim." He goes, "I swear to God, on live video, he goes, 'You're Arab and Muslim. How many terrorists do you think there are?'" I'm like,
Wow.
80, 83? I mean, I have no idea. But he really said that. And he didn't say it from a malicious point of view. He
No.
said it like I might have been the first Muslim he talked to. So
Yeah,
he thought like
probably.
maybe I know. Like I mean, well, we have the meetings and I'm not sure where we are right now. It looks around 85 to 90. But it was weird. But also at the same time, we both know, Cassim, for what we've been through. There's a line between someone being malicious and someone asking questions. And someone asking questions, even if they seem in a way a little bigoted, you can tell their intention. And if it's good,
Right.
you got to have this conversation. When they're bigots, when it's accusations, then you fight back. I mean, that's
Yeah,
my line. What about
I,
you?
I agree. I've got a term I use called collateral education, where if someone is being bigoted towards me, even if they're not being bigoted, but asking a question that maybe isn't the most appropriate or sincere way, I always default on the side of, what, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, knowing full well this person may not even care what my answer is, but there are folks watching and there are folks observing, looking to understand, who may be too afraid, maybe don't know how to ask that question in the first place, and I want to provide an answer to folks. And this is one beef I have with some folks on the left is, look, sometimes you just gotta let people ask the dumb question and disarm them with kindness, right? What's that
Hmm.
Smashing Pumpkin song, right? Disarm you with a smile. Like sometimes you gotta do that, and it's not always fun. It can be frustrating. It can be even humiliating at times. But I have found that the net positive of that has been far greater. A couple years ago, some Islamophobe told me to leave this country. We don't need your Sharia ilk here. and I responded by donating to his GoFundMe and asking my followers to donate to his medical GoFundMe. We raised like 25,000, paid off his GoFundMe completely. It was fantastic.
Wow.
And I can't tell you, Dean, I probably conservatively, between DMs and emails and tweets, got more than 10,000 responses from people. The vast majority saying, I've never met a Muslim. I don't know anything about Islam, but if this is what Islam is, then yeah, I'm a fan. And to me, you can't buy that kind of publicity. You can't buy that kind of branding. That only happens by doing your best, lead by example. And I firmly believe in the positivity, the I'm an optimist on people, and I feel like if you do that enough times, you build enough goodwill where it becomes, in a positive way, infectious and it spreads that way.
It's it's a beautiful sentiment, and I do believe in giving people grace
Yeah,
and that understanding, and that there are people who want to change. I'm not look. I'm half Sicilian. You gotta earn trust with me, okay? I
right,
gotta be honest with you. So, like, if you told me, "Oh, I used to be bad. I said bad things about this group or that group. I changed." You gotta earn that. You gotta show me through actions, right? But if they do start showing, I am so happy to encourage them more. We can't close people off like they made one mistake and they said one racist thing.
right,
If they can earn it sincerely and through words and action is vitally important. We have to be there because if not, then they're isolated forever on the far right, and we don't want
right.
that. We
That's right.
want them back in mainstream society. So, last couple of things I want to touch on with you, my friend. You were at a rally Saturday,
Yeah.
and share. You wrote a great article about it. Share a little bit about, from your point of view, why is it so important that these rallies are happening, that they're growing, and that other people hear about what is going on?
Well, I think the first thing I want to point out is that these rallies are happening. They're going to continue to happen, and they are necessary. I want to be very clear, though, they're not sufficient. The rallies in themselves are not going to save our democracy. They are a necessary growth step to your second part of your question of why they're important, because it helps people come out of their shells, recognize that they're not alone, recognize that there is a movement of folks committed to justice and humanity, and it's an opportunity for folks to get involved in a very low impact, no cost environment. You're not spending any money on except the gas money to drive to the rally effectively,
Right.
right? And so I encourage folks to get involved. To it's the formula is you activate, you mobilize, you organize, and you transform. These rallies are the activate and mobilize stage. You activate and you mobilize at these rallies, and then you meet with people and you organize. Get involved with your local indivisible group, your local Democratic Women's Group, your local Moms Demand Group, what have you. You organize, and then you collectively grab everyone you know to get involved in campaigns and transform our political system by electing people-funded candidates, by electing folks who are going to stand up to these dark pack lobbies and these corporate entities, by electing folks committed to things like universal health care, ending the genocide in Gaza, actually upholding Supreme Court rulings when it says due process of law needs to be
Right.
followed. And in that transformation process, we live in this clickbait culture where I want to click, I want the dopamine hit of the retweet, of the repost, of the share, of the subscription. We all, demand that, but that's not how life works. Life requires immense work. You want to run a marathon, it's going to take time to get ready to run that marathon, but you do it because you see the reward is there. We want to save our democracy, our republic. It's going to require us to be able to, activate and mobilize and organize and transform. And so when I was out there last weekend, I saw people activating and mobilizing. More than half of them had never been to any kind of rally before. I saw them collecting with each other and building coalitions, which was exciting. And I also saw them pissed off at two things. And I'll close my rant with this. The one thing they're pissed
Sure.
off about is the cowardice of Republicans to stand up against Trump. You got Senator Murkowski admitting that she's scared. My
Yep.
God, woman, you're a U.S. senator. You're one of the most powerful politicians on earth. If you're scared and voting for Trump, what hope do any of the rest of us have? That's one thing. The second thing they're upset about is, and I heard this numerous times, we need less Schumers and more Van Hollens. We need less of politicians,
Mhm.
talking about how evil Trump is, and more politicians standing up and raising awareness and humanizing the people that he's trying to demonize and rallying folks. I think if we see more of that courage, we're going to see more effective responses and hopefully have a chance at saving our republic.
I think you put it so well. It is the first step in activation, going out there. Then it's building coalitions, and then it's. I think for everyone who's a Democrat, we get it. It's about electing people who are going to be fighters,
Yeah.
and there are different people for different times.
Yep.
And right now, you need the fighters. If it's Jasmine Crockett, AOC, Bernie, to Van Hollen's great Jamie Raskin.
Yep.
There's a bunch of fighters, but it's the reality is, think about it, everyone listening and watching, think about it. The fighters are the exception for the Democratic Party.
Unfortunately.
That's why we all name the same ones over and over.
Yeah.
Because the others are like, they're not all surrendering. They just don't want to fight. They have too much to lose in their mind.
Yeah.
We have too much to lose. So, well, Kasim, thank you, my friend, for joining. Again, Kasim Substack is a great one. Let's address this with Kasim Rashid. I get it all the time. I read it. I learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining today, my friend. I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And thanks for everyone else who tuned in. I really appreciate it. Have a great night.